Сега ќе имаме прилика да видиме како на овој проблем гледат меѓународните организации во нашата земја. Господин Едуард Андерсон, раководител на одделот за јавна безбедност и соработка со заедницата при мисијата во ОБСЕ, сигурно има да ни каже нешто повеќе. Повелете, господин Андерсон.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation, and to the panel. Thank you to the translators that helped me to get across in your beautiful country that I not only work in, but have two sons that I care for here. And I will tell you, I have to admit something to you, but first I want to also greet you on behalf of His Excellency Ambassador Wall for the invitation. So my admission to you, before I give you some statistics, is that I left my speech in my office. But that's okay because I wrote it and studied that. And I'm glad I did, only because I have so much notes from the panels that don't have me worried, but as a retired officer out of Chicago working major cases for a long, and now, as I said, retired, I don't worry for you. I'm concerned, and I'll stay on the international path because I'll talk about some of these statistics, and those numbers I'll mention to you in some great detail. But I'm almost glad, and it sounds a bit odd to say this, but I will explain, that so far the youngest victim you have is 2 years old or 6 years old. But I'll explain what I mean by that. It's not good at all. So first off, let me give you some numbers. I'm going to revert back to those numbers because I think it's an excellent group that even international should be participating more in these meetings to really learn from you, from practitioners and educators and the fields from the ministries, and the investment is better than many working groups that I can tell you we've put together. So thank you for that. So here's some numbers, and I'm going to explain these numbers. I'm only going to give you the numbers. I must first let you know that these numbers are not your numbers. Internationals are very good at giving your statistics back to you. But I think you probably know your statistics quite well, so I won't do that. But I'll just tell you some numbers, and then we'll revert back. So 1, 10, 6, 33, 17, and 3. And then 42. But I'll explain those numbers to you in just a bit. So everything you've talked about gives you a chance to get ahead of this phenomenon that is going to grow exponentially for you. And I don't mean that to be pessimistic. If you look at I'll joke a bit with you about tattoos, but I'll tell you why I joke about that. Because first off, I have tattoos. I've been to Afghanistan. I'm retired from our military, and Iraq, and I've been in Beirut also. I've seen the drug trade. I've seen how the war on heroin stops, but I will tell you, there's open gaps there. Heroin makes big money. There is religious aspects. That's not wrong. But there are gaps, just like the oil trade and the embargo, that open up for a while, and the drug market shifts very quickly because the worst thing you have is rule of law. That's the worst, because it's the best. And I tell you that as a police officer that wanted to arrest everybody, but I had to remember from prosecutors and judges, not what I know, what I can prove, because the system is imperfect, but it works. Internationally, as I mentioned first off, I think there's some things we can learn from you first before we go into what we can tell you best practices, because probably what you'd like to hear is some worst practices too, so you don't repeat those. These cases are extremely complex. Why do I say tattoos are great? It's not because I have them from my time in the military. My wife used to tell me I look like a prisoner. So it's not a fashion statement, but it's an identifier, and let them identify themselves. Collect data on that. I don't mean to say this to the youth who do this, but you need to build data, and your data streams need to be strong yourselves, because you will be the best interpreters of your cases for Macedonia, internally or externally, no matter what I can tell you as a practitioner. Tattoos, the baggies, every piece counts for these cases because they are extremely complex. What do I mean? You're probably already dealing with this with the victim offenders or offenders that are victims. When the young man or young lady is incarcerated for helping to transport drugs, they are an offender and a victim. And you have to be able to deal with that and say, I have to take care of the victims that are a part of this crime. Because as you probably know, but I would just say as an international non-expert, you're the experts, right? That if it's a drug case, it's probably coupled with quality of life going down somewhere. In a neighborhood, in an area, drugs tends to have this terrible spider web of underground that we don't like to talk about, because drugs, and I hope not in the room, but drugs affects a lot of us, not just in our careers, but family members, friends that have been touched by this. And we don't passively push it away, but it's cocaine versus other substances. Cocaine is cleaner. More people with money do cocaine. But crack cocaine is for those that have less money. Heroin is bad. Heroin with needles is very bad. So that's people that do it with needles. I do it by snorting it. I don't. I'm just it's not an admission of a drug use, thank goodness. But this is how we even set up sub-demographics when it comes to drugs. It's absolutely attached to a quality of life where it's the young victim in an imperfect world, because it's the practice of law and the practice of medicine and the practice of law enforcement. It's not the perfection yet, but we can work towards that. And a lot of society needs you to answer for everything. I had, to the doctors and to the professors, I had a 6-year-old woman try to kill me with a screwdriver, and I thought she was crazy. Most people would think that. She had to be detained, and the doctors explained, no, you're wrong. She's malnutrition. She doesn't have enough proteins and carbohydrates. What I mean by not a story about my career, we really have to be educated as professionals, too, from each other. So every case, a tattoo, a baggie, a new way of transportation is very important to even bring back to your academies, to tell your local preventive councils. I do understand for the prosecutors and the judges and for the police officers and ministry, there are some bits of information that must remain confidential. There are bits of information that are present and continuous investigations that you cannot give back to the individuals. You cannot tell all your communities about why a case isn't moving as fast as they want, because unfortunately a case never moves that complex. It's an adversarial system. But drugs is a spider web that catches so much, and you could almost see it like a shadow coming over certain neighborhoods. You can see the transition. I will get into the point about where as internationals, I think you should even demand upon us a bit more. And I'm not being derogatory or negative about this. You have your relationships, as Madam Prosecutor said, on Eurojust and with the United States. But I think we need to deliver more for you with your communities, with the medical practitioners, with the professors, with the prosecutors, the judges, saying, come to us and tell us about your cases, and don't just tell us your shining stars. We need to know, because everything you spoke about, I'm thinking a bit, even though it's an infectious matter, I'm thinking, thank goodness they're not just talking about this, but we're not talking about catastrophic cases where entire neighborhoods have been changed. And maybe they have, don't get me wrong. I mean, a drug case is like cancer. And as soon as it gets to stage 4, it's almost impossible to control. And I'm talking from a metropolitan police department that had major equipment, investments, officers, prosecutor task forces that just work drugs, where you might have prosecutors that have multiple cases, judges that are having many cases, and still an imperfect system. Internationals, particularly in the OSCE, as a non-executive mission, were programmatic. And I think particularly a mission after 30 years and what our ambassador is doing is becoming relevant to what you need, what we think you need, if that makes sense. We have to have a much more tailored approach. It's not a system where we're building things, it's a system where we need to listen to you and bring stuff in. Listen to you from the medical practitioners, from the professors, from the prosecutors, and tailor things that we as internationals can bring to you. Edward Anderson, thank you for living in our country and enjoying the schools and the richness of walking around. In all your years of experience, can you tell us about your case studies? I don't need to hear about your laws. I have Google, I can look those up. I need to hear this. This is what we need from OSCE, for example. Or help us in a working group. Help us develop the laws, because you're very busy. All of you are raising a better country. I'm a guest. We are a guest. We should bring something to help that. I'm benefiting from what you do, and I should bring something to you. That's not derogatory towards internationals. It's just a point of where we need to be, because what you do as quiet professionals maybe will help my community thousands of kilometers away on arresting someone that I will never hear about or know your name, but you stopped something before I even knew about it. And that's the part of doing this in the justice system. But the trouble is, too, and I think as the judge rightfully said, taking the vehicle and confiscation is extremely effective, confiscation and sequestration. It is devastating in the United States. It was devastating in Chicago. Take everything you can from ill-gotten gains. Take the ring off of the finger and the watch off of the arm because you owe it back to the state. That's correct. I don't mind it. But can you actually control those interests? What I mean by that is, if you take a farm away from the farmer who's also using it for drug storage, can you take care of all the animals on the farm? What I mean by that is it's not pessimistic. I did a search warrant and took a farm once, and they were very mad at me because we had to feed horses. It cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. So my case was great. I consumed too much for my capacity. It was a wonderful case. But suddenly our budget was depleting because we didn't think far enough ahead. Confiscation is important. Taxation violations are absolutely important because dismantling it, but back to the judge's point, and I would tell him, we could sit and talk about cases of taking vehicles away and how the suspects, criminals, are crying. Don't take my vehicle. But we have to realize too, and not the judge's fault at all, or the prosecutors, maybe they mentioned, I wonder if I'll be okay with my wife or my children, what they'll know about me. I hope my mother won't be upset because it's don't take my vehicle, if that makes sense. Don't take what my riches are, and it's a breakdown of other parts of society. It's incredibly cancerous. We were talking about fentanyl. And then hopefully you will never deal with carfentanil, which is 1,000 times even stronger and more addictive and even cheaper to have come in. 75,000 people in a state are gone because of fentanyl and carfentanil in one state in the U.S., in one, almost by the metropolitan areas. I will tell you this, and I hope you never deal with it because the conversation here is something I'm very happy to bring back to the ambassador, how proactive it is to stop this, and I understand. When it comes to the drug trade, you put a finger in a hole, the doctors are helping bring people together, the professors are getting people ready to be educated, and as soon as you put that finger in, a leak springs somewhere else because it's so profitable. It's profitable transporting it through the weapons market, funding terrorism, and as I said, I spent 5 times in Afghanistan. I can tell you the drug trade immensely wrecked many lives there from our side too, because it's not inexpensive to buy weapons and to try to control areas. So that being said, you can get caught up and it's almost a no-win situation. But I think even for times when I was very frustrated, and now as an international, being supportive of your efforts, you always realize that one case pops up where you save someone at the hospital, where they're in your class and now they want to learn, where the prosecutor, somebody comes back and says, you don't know you saved an entire community, or to a judge. Because I know you have confidentiality with your clients and the judges have to be very restrictive of information. That's one, there's probably more star cases like that. I'll tell you the statistics very quickly to give you some more context to what I mean and I believe where we can assist you. Because my only worry is in the conversation is you're telling me everything that can be coming if there's not very deliberate action. It will be imperfect. It will be imperfect because the market is out. Think about right now how connected the systems are digitalized with the investigators. It's pretty rough right now. It's tough. If you said as a prosecutor, I'm not picking on you, Madam Prosecutor, to a judge, tell me how we're depleting artificial intelligence that's chemically making new drugs. What are we doing? How do we grab the information out and lawfully exploit artificial intelligence? Okay, we can help with that. I've had cases about that. Cryptocurrency, how do you not send a message to that blockchain that where you make that blockchain move a bit and everybody disappears in seconds and they take those bitcoins and go, and the prosecutor says, what did you do? Well, we sent a spike. We didn't really know how to do it, but we're trying to help. You shut down the whole system. We have to retract this entire organization because that's what's happening. That's what's happening with the market, the drug market. Some, as I think was mentioned here and with others, some of these drug networks have more currency to move than some states, what they can do. And they are looking to move at a speed, not a speed of life or light, a speed of profit. And your law enforcement, I hope not your prosecutors and your judges, on the other side of the profession, how well can we protect them? I don't want to open up another controversy at all, because when on the front lines, besides the children and the parents, you have to have people in the rule of law, and you have to offer them some protection, because if I'm a drug lord and you're getting in my way, I just have to whisper, maybe I know where your children go to school as I pass by you on the sidewalk. That's all. Nothing, no threat. And there's so many aspects to this, and it's not my duty to the Honorable Minister and the ministries we have here. I surely don't have solutions. So let me tell you about the statistics real quick. So the youngest person I've seen addicted to drugs was 1 minute old. As soon as she came out of the womb of the mother, she was addicted to cocaine because the mother was a cocaine addict. So 1 minute old. It was diagnosed there because of the signs that the baby had. They instantly did a rapid toxicology check to see what was happening. Our hospitals, sadly, are very aware of this. They're sadly very aware of this. And then you have this part of that. What do we do now? I'm not asking you that. I'm not being rhetorical with my silly questions. What do you do? What I mean by that is you need to arrest the mother for child neglect. Are we going to start procedures to take the child and parental rights away like that? Do we start that process administratively? So the mother is there, a drug user, a victim of a lifestyle, in this case, of a family of drug users, losing the baby. So that case starts, parental. Doctors coming in to treat her for drug addiction and treat the baby and separating them. Prosecution for her for criminal offenses. The officer sitting there and take care of that and say, okay, that's just one part of the case. And then, if we're very smart officers, we want to talk with her too with our prosecution, and we want to ask her if she can become an informant for us, and maybe we can work out her getting her child back. Yeah. However, the child needs to go into foster care, and you have to say to yourself, what is your social system? How many, I don't mean to sound like cats on the street or stray dogs. What is the overwhelming, Kachani tested so much in a great tragedy. Look at drugs now with children. How many babies can be put in the foster care system that are drug addicted? I'm not challenging you with that at all. We have to ask the same question. We have a juvenile system that no longer puts people in by their crimes. They put people in by their body weight and their age group, just in case they get into fights because it's overwhelming from drugs. So that's just one case there of the victim, offender, prosecutors taking cases, social service coming in, a baby 1 minute old, now older obviously as time goes on, being pulled away from a nurturing person, right, hopefully closest to that, and being put in a foster care system that then you have to monitor too with social services. And then the baby, thank goodness alive and addicted, becomes a body of evidence. There has to be forensic testing. So 1 minute. 10 years old, 10, number 10. Youngest person I arrested for a double homicide over drugs, 10 years old. And he did not care at all. He did not care because his world was no longer about parents and going to school. He was 10 years old, and he was one of the shooters in a double homicide over his own gang because they wanted to take the profits away from the gang member, because drugs is insidious inside itself too. I hope you don't have to deal with that, but it's an international view of what happens with the drug world. Okay. Six. Now I will tell you what the effects are. So I'm very fortunate to be in the mission and to serve to Ambassador Wall in the OSCE. I'm very fortunate to make it out of two careers, particularly policing and dealing with these type of cases. So let me tell you how it also affects on the other end. So six years it took in the state where I'm from to prosecute the man that misidentified my sister and killed her. He was on drugs, psychotropic drugs. My sister's a victim of homicide. She was 42 years old. She left behind 3 children. We went to court 33 times. My father sat in court 33 times, 6 years. So when we ask you to speed up your court system, sometimes we have to reflect on ourselves, on an adversarial system that is the benefit of rule of law, that looks to the adversarial legal process, a bench trial with a judge, present your evidence properly, and the opposition properly looking for technical or other defects in the case. That's the system. And it works. 6 years in a big country that makes excellent movies, that has a huge police forces. 6 years, that's one case. And the family, the social system, the medical concern is 33 times my father went to court, not once heard my sister's name, because it was the people versus the offender. That's normal process. 17 years to be in the penitentiary, the individual's serving 5 years. Fair? There's a whole part of the system that has to work, even for the benefit of the offender, even as it's hard to explain the story to you. But I hope you don't have that dynamic where you're seeing it from both sides. I don't want, but it is, another part to that was, she left behind 3 children. So whatever happens too, after the medical care, after the judges do their job, or the judge, after the prosecutors aggressively and properly do their job, there's a fractured family. From one case, there's a completely fractured family. There's a niece that tried to commit suicide. There's a nephew that found his way so awkward that he was discharged from our military for criminal offenses because he got into a fight over his mother being killed at an argument. And one nephew who's holding on pretty well. They're all doing better, thank goodness. But I share that with you because internationals are very good at telling you all our best practices. And we do have some, because we've seen our worst practices too. But the victimology in the case that come, it's the drug case, it's the victim, it's the offender, it's all the technology and the forensics and the good educators taking care. It's getting the new prosecutors ready with experienced cases, the new judges, the continuing education for those practitioners so they're learning about every new drug coming out, because the offenders will change the model of their drugs so it doesn't match your criminal elements. And then it's, how do we keep our communities and our society together when it fractures so much? And I think on our end, on the international end, I think that's, particularly for OSCE, that's obviously diplomatically. I don't want our ambassador upset at me, but that's where you say, thank you for everything you've done. That was very good, thank you. What we need is, here's exactly what we need. We want your case studies. We want your practitioner. We want, if you have curriculum, give it to us. We'll decide what's good. We'll decide as prosecutors. Thank you, Edward, for that curriculum on complex investigations. We're going to use it now. Tell us about it. We're going to use it for what's beneficial for us and what works with our EU standards, for the acquis, as well as what takes care of our communities. I think that's the paradigm shift, and I'm happy to say our ambassador is doing that. That's the paradigm shift where we need to be to support you. Because you're far ahead already than maybe in the tragic situation you're describing than we ever were. Because you're a much smaller country, you have much tighter communities, you have stronger social. I understand you will tell me, but they're changing. Yes, they're changing, and I'm sure they are. I'm sure they are. But I think you have an opportunity with the trafficking coming through, with the investments coming in, that not a luxury. It's not a luxury. I think you have the ability to be into the curve or almost ahead of the curve of what's going to be happening. And I see that as something, and I'll close this out to you, and of course, as the panel decides, subject to your questions, I want to go back to the other point too. I raised my 2 sons here. They go to school here. Okay, let me explain to you a bit about that to thank you for what you do too. I raised them myself. My wife passed away several years ago. That's okay, that's all right. I have some skills as a father, I can take care. Each day, I let them walk to school on their own. It's not that far. And at that point, when we let go of our children, we hope we gave them the best even for that day. Because in between that walk to that school, I don't know what they'll encounter. If I was back where I had the police, they would not walk that distance to school at all. Here, thank you to all of you and what you're doing to stem the tide, whether it be drugs. They walk, and I'm fine with that. So my point is, closing out, is it's not dismal, but you do have a shadow creeping over you. You do. Please, as you choose the most appropriate, and it's not that you're missing things. I think the part of the international, I will amplify again, is let us really be of service to you. Let us be of tailored service to you. And when it's not enough, then let us know. Because the shadow can be pushed back with some sunlight. We just have to get that opportunity and not lose the advantages that you still have. But I thank you for the opportunity, and I thank the panel and all the prior panels, because I have quite notes to write to our ambassador. So thank you very much.